Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and this week I have with me Miss Kia Burns. How are you, Kia?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you being willing and eager to join the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So we'll just dive right in. You want to just tell us your background, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Kia Burns. I'm born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah. Grew up here in Murray. Pretty low-key story about me. Out of high school, I did hair and makeup and then went to college for sign language interpreting. At that point, I dropped out, went into business with my ex-husband. We went into real estate and been in real estate since. And just working into other areas right now, which we're about to talk about. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So, real estate near and dear to me. So that's always a good place to be in. So kind of you want to talk a little bit about um, PTSD and your experiences with it
Yeah.
and your story.
Yeah. So I grew up in a very, very abusive household. There was sexual abuse on a regular basis for years at a time, which eventually included getting raped. And I never talked about it. I did go through a course and I told myself that it was helping me, but really I just manipulated the entire thing to just push it down deeper. And then about 2 years ago, I got into plant medicine, and each ceremony I would go into, and I would always have the intent, okay, well, I know there's this darkness that I never really wanted to look at. So if you want to bring it up, I'll look at it. But it was just never like brought up in the medicine. And then for me, I'm like, oh, I'm good then. I'm healed. It's all good. I don't have any issues. About a year and a half ago, I found out I had a brain tumor. And it was a very sudden thing that I found out about it. I had having emergency surgery. I was about to lose my vision and go blind. And I knew somehow it was connected. So I partook in another medicine called TOAD or Bufo or 5-MeO DMT. And in that, I saw my brain tumor was all of my sexual trauma manifested, specifically the rape that I had never acknowledged, I had never talked about. And really, there was very few people that I had even told. Even when I reported the abuse, I don't think I ever even reported the rape because I was just too afraid to report it. I don't know why I didn't do all of that. But so I went on this crazy journey of having surgery, and everything was best case scenario. It wasn't cancerous. It was physically the hardest thing I've ever experienced in my life. It was on my pituitary, which controls your endocrine, and your endocrine controls everything basically. So physically, I mean, all of my senses were haywire. It was very, very challenging, but I was never afraid. I was never anxious. I was never scared. I just had this knowing that everything was going to work out because I was ready to look at everything and not leave one stone unturned. And I've just been on this journey of healing ever since and facing it. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's amazing. That's a lot of painful stuff
Mm-hmm.
to have to go through and experience. So what made you decide that you wanted to actually acknowledge it and do something about it? What was that turning point for you?
Um, well, there was a couple turning points. When I found out I had the brain tumor, I knew it was connected.
Mm,
And when I was finally unloading it, I had just disassociated with everything. So for months, I just had so many memories just resurface, and I was reliving it. And I basically just went into this shell of I was afraid to even go outside. That's how petrified I was and terrified I was. And then when I had my surgery and I had my recovery, I just still had all this fear, but I didn't know what to do with it. And so it was just trying to figure out what does work, what doesn't work. At the time, I wasn't open to therapy. I'd had some really traumatic experiences with therapy when I was a child connected to my abuse. And So that for me was not an option.
Mm.
And it was just me just kind of winging it, trying to figure things out on my own. And I felt like I did a really good job to the point where I was like, okay, I am at a point where I've done a lot of work by myself. I've done a lot of work with the medicine, but I also need professional guidance at this point because there's something that's way far out of my reach that I really need guidance on. And I was kind of hinkering with the thought of going to therapy. The one thing that actually pushed me over the edge was I had a party at my house, and I had a friend bring a guy that had met him once before, but I wasn't a huge fan. But I'm very much like the more the merrier. Like I'm also a people pleaser. That's kind of my trauma response, is to be a people pleaser, which is a very common response.
Yep.
For abuse victims. So this man came, he got very belligerent drunk, and he very vulgarly, predatorily started coming on to me. And for me, it just triggered everything, because when I was sexually assaulted, I was in my home and I didn't have anywhere to hide and I didn't have anywhere to go. So after the party, the whole night, I actually just stayed up in my closet shaking because I was so afraid. I didn't know what to do. The next morning, I went and had coffee with one of my really close friends, and he's been in jujitsu for most of the time that we've been friends. It's about 20 years. And I've always been super curious about it. And we had coffee, and he said, I think you should go to a class. Like, you've always been curious about it. Just go, just see how you like it. And he's like, it's a really great outlet for me, but you should go try it. And I was like, all right. And then he said, and you need to talk to somebody. You need to really talk to someone. So that night I went to my first jujitsu class, and I don't even know how to explain it. It's like a light flip switched, and I realized I can take care of myself. I can protect myself. And most importantly, I'm worth it. So then that kind of took off the hard edge of me calling and getting into therapy. And I remember when I was in therapy and I was going over my story, I'm very much I don't like to waste time. So I messaged the therapist and I said, hey, I'm going to just send you an email with all of my trauma so that way we can just dive in. I don't want to spend 6 months of you learning everything. And I remember when I typed it out, it was 24 pages. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I went through this. And I never acknowledged any of it until recently. So I got into therapy right off the bat, started doing EMDR and ART, which is phenomenal. I highly suggest anyone with PTSD does that. And then also I've just kind of created my own little EMDR with jujitsu. So I'm going onto the mat and I'm going in positions that I've been in before with men. And I'm literally triggering myself in a safe and controlled environment. But then I'm able to have, for me, it's like little guidelines of like, if I can see the mat and I get triggered and I have a memory resurface, it's not real if I can see the mat, because I couldn't see the mat in that memory. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I've been on this journey with jujitsu and ART, and yeah, that's how it really finally pulled the trigger with me, and what I've been working on right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I've never done ART much, but I did quite a bit of EMDR, and I had pretty good success. It's I've talked to a lot of people who've had really phenomenal success with it. That it's taken care of their problems and helped them to process and reassociate things the way they needed to. I also think that the what you touched on with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, um, it's an outlet, which is great. For a lot of people, finding the self-care stuff is difficult because we kind of get stuck in these funks, and the last thing that we want to do is go do something. We just want to like feel exhausted, don't want to go do anything. But going and doing that is such a great thing, and I think that probably really plays a big role in helping you to flourish too.
Oh, for sure. And I want to touch on, there's a book that I read. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. I read that, and I've noticed since I've done jujitsu, I started jujitsu, I've had so many more memories resurface. but I'm able to now pinpoint exactly like where in my body they are actually stored, and to, again, just in a safe and controlled environment, see that and allow that to come up and process it and acknowledge it.
That's awesome. That's so good. I'm really proud of you for going through those steps because it's a hard thing to get into those first initial steps. And then to actually once you start to thrive in it though,
Yeah.
that's where like the real growth happens. And from what I've seen of you lately, like some of your posts on social media and then just talking to you, it really seems like you're starting to gain that steam and momentum,
Oh yeah.
which is where magic happens. So I'm
It's,
excited for you.
that's the perfect word. It's magical. And like
Mhm.
now I can't imagine my life without jujitsu. And everything kind of revolves around, well, if I do this, then I got to make sure that I can change and be at the gym at this amount of time, because I don't miss my training at all.
Mhm.
I will not miss my training. And also too, when I'm having a horrible day, that's what makes me feel better now, is because I leave and I might have gotten my ass beat, but I still am stronger than before I went in there, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. So you touched on it a little bit about kind of what you're transitioning into now. Do you want
Yeah.
to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to be in the space of helping people acknowledge and heal and feel that they're not alone, regarding sexual trauma and physical abuse trauma. It's very obviously very near and dear to my heart. Um, and I know I'm supposed to be in this space, and I still am not quite sure what that looks like. I'm just going with the flow and working with it. This is a huge step for me. I made a post about having trauma. And for me, I even wanted to make a post about it for months. And I just was so afraid. And then I realized the only thing I'm afraid of is not being believed. And for me, I've reached to a place of I don't care if I'm believed or not, because I know my truth. I know I'm worth it. And I know that I now can take care of myself. And for me, that's all that matters. But if I can help someone get to that space, man, like I'm super passionate about that.
Yeah, that's beautiful stuff. That's what it's all about. Finding that comfortable spot with yourself and knowing your truth and I think that was like really the first interaction we'd had. We had met at
Super Bowl.
a, at a social event like a month or two earlier, maybe I think. But that was really like the first interaction that we had. And I saw that post and I was like, oh, I got to reach out to her and just tell her that's awesome stuff because it's such a huge thing. I can remember for me, like the first post that I talked about, because I never really talked to anybody about my PTSD or my trauma, other than like very close circle of people. But like the first time I posted, that was the scariest shit I'd ever done. And I've talked in front of audiences of a couple hundred people, and that didn't bother me, but videoing myself just scared the hell out of me. And then just being that open and vulnerable about it. But once I did it, it was just such a huge release and it just it made space for growth
Yeah.
and made space for healing, which is a wonderful thing. Because if I would have known that, I probably would have done it like months earlier. It
Yeah.
was just just a difficult thing, and it didn't need to be. So, do you kind of know what you want to do with that space? You're still figuring it out. You got
I'm
any?
still figuring out, because I mean, I'll have an idea of something, and then it's like I want to do whatever's for the highest good for me and for everyone else. And
Mm,
because of my experience with my brain tumor, I'm so deep in this journey of surrender and just letting go and letting God. So I'm super open to it. I still love real estate. I love working with people. I love helping people close on homes. Like I love it.
mm,
Um, I don't know. I'm super open to what it looks like, whether it's nonprofits. There is an amazing program called the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. Do you know
mm.
who Elizabeth Smart is?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She's in fact, Utah girl as well.
Yes. So I did her program. So what that is it's only for women, but essentially it's a 6 to 8 week course, and you learn fundamentals of jujitsu, Krav Maga, Muay Thai, and it's basically a self defense course. But it also is so it's very educating with trauma,
Mm,
and being assaulted. And at the end of the course, they call it the bully beatdown, and they have a grown man dress up in SWAT gear and attack you, and you fight. And that was an incredible experience for me. And going forward now, I can go back to the bully beatdowns and just show up and just to fight. And before, like my first one, I literally was just, I was an emotional wreck. I was crying and I had a hard time. I felt like fighting back, running away. And now they have to remind me, no, you got to go. Like you got to, because this fire has been lit in me. There, it's like, no, I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to be quiet anymore. And that was a huge piece of me of seeing other women take a stand and fight, and also teach and share that word. So I'd love to get more involved in that. Anyone I talk to that's ever had any trauma, I always suggest them if it's a female. But I don't know. I've kind of started playing around with writing a book a little bit, and then I don't know. I'm super open to it. I definitely want to have events at my home. I've talked a little bit with some mutual friends of ours, having like a breathwork class, yoga class, but also make it specifically about healing trauma. So, but I'm really open to how it looks.
Yeah, and that's an awesome thing too, because like with the breath work, I thought that I had healed so much stuff, and actually I had Jen Coles on a couple weeks ago, who does breath work, and I think you know her too. And I had started doing breath work with her, and I was like just blown away. I was like, well, where did this come from? Because I actually thought like I was in a really good space, and I still am, but I've made it a somewhat regular routine to go do that like once a month, every couple months, and it's amazing what comes out. And even just the little things that are just kind of buried in you, that are just weighing you down, that you don't even realize that are there, and then they resurface, you process them, move along from it, and it's amazing that something as simple as that can have such a profound healing effect.
Just air.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awesome thing, I think, to do some events, especially, being a woman yourself and working with other women puts you in kind of a special spot, because I certainly don't think that I would be effective talking with women that are, victims of abuse or sexual trauma, just because it was likely at the hands of another man.
But what's beautiful is there is this huge wave of men coming forward that are sharing their experiences. And I would imagine that it's even harder for a man to come out and talk about his experiences and his trauma. And I truly feel like that if women can see men doing it, they will be more inclined to share as well, because men are able, it's that divine masculine. They're able to hold place, they're able to provide the structure and maintain the order. And I feel like it's absolutely a balance. But when I made my post, I couldn't believe the amount of women that I knew that have then shared with me their experiences. And for me, it's like, why aren't we talking about this? Why is this not more discussed and educated and taught and shared? I mean, we live in Utah, and it's on every street. It's on every street in every age group. And I think it's 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted in their life. And that's insane statistics.
Yeah. And I think that what you're doing, and your willingness to post what you posted, and then tell your story, will further embolden and inspire others to share their story, and to be able to talk about it and be willing to talk about these things. Because so often these things that we don't want to talk about, like that we the most do not want to talk about, are the things that we need to talk about the most. They weigh us down. I mean, I was sexually abused by a neighbor as a child, and fortunately it wasn't a long drawn out thing, but those things stick with you. And then there's shame, there's guilt, and all these things associated with it. But if you're willing to process it like you are, there's so much growth and so much healing. And I mean, I can look at the amount of work that I've done in the past few years, and I'm sure you can look the same at the work that you've done, where I think you've actually already said it just a few minutes ago, that you can't imagine life without having done those things.
Yeah.
And to spend our lives being trapped in a dark place and miserable because we don't want to acknowledge something that happened that wasn't even our fault
Mhm.
is
Well, I
no
feel
way to live.
that's so much part of grooming too. We're
Mhm.
groomed to believe that I mean, it is bad, it's evil, but we're not bad. What
Yeah.
happened to us was bad, but it
Mhm.
doesn't make us bad. And I think a lot of it, people don't realize that we are groomed.
Mhm.
And we're made to think these things of, oh, well, if you do this, then no one's going to talk to you. Or if you do this, no one's going to like you. Or if you do this, like some people their families get threatened. And we hear about sexual trauma a little bit, but we don't ever hear about the grooming that goes with it. And that's a huge piece of it. It really is, because that's so much of what gives us the belief of, oh, I can't tell people, I
Mhm.
can't talk.
Yeah, and that's going to be the very first thing that they start with because
Yeah,
it's the abuser's self-preservation.
exactly. Exactly.
And if they feel that they can preserve themselves by making you feel guilty as shame
Yeah.
for what's going on, then it gives them that power. And it's so important that people realize that they don't have that power,
Yeah.
that they're just manipulating and trying to control you, but you have the power.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow, this is just a deep conversation.
It's a really deep conversation. I do kind of want to touch on something. It's just I'm very nervous.
Yeah.
Part of being groomed is for me, it eventually got to a space where it was really the only positive interaction I would get a lot of times. So I got to a
Mm,
point where I actually would seek it out. And for me, it was a piece of me always knew that it was bad.
mm,
But in the same sentence, that was the only positive interaction that I got. And
mm,
so for me, it just became normal to me. Like it no longer was like, oh, it's this bad thing, but it's just, I knew I wasn't supposed to talk about it, but I would seek it out. And that's something that is not talked about. And
mm.
for me, when I started to actually open that conversation and realize that's part of the grooming and that mindset and that it's literally brainwashing you, I realized I had so much more power than I ever thought I ever had. And it opened so many more doors of healing on so much deeper levels. And so that is something that I do want to talk about. And I think it should be talked about is that level of grooming. And because I feel like that's a lot of reasons why women don't and men, they don't come out because there are pieces of it. And I remember I was told when I first barely started sharing it, um, I was told a body is a body, and if you press the right button, it will respond in a positive way. And for me, I felt like I literally had a ton of bricks just fall off my back because I felt like it was my fault. I felt gross. I felt dirty. I felt disgusting. But that's part of the grooming. They know that.
Mm.
And that's something that's not talked about. And for me, that would have made a world of difference for me if I knew that that's part of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it yeah, total sense because this isn't anything that you're taught, ahead of
Yeah.
time. Like the event just happened and then you're taught what your experience is.
Yeah. I remember I was in ninth grade and I was in a law and justice order class, and I was we were going over something else, and then the teacher very abruptly said, hey, we're going to actually cut the course in half and we're going to move into sexual trauma. And I was like, what's that? I've never heard of that. And I guess he had received multiple requests that we go over that. And so then the next few days he started going over sexual trauma and sexual abuse and rape. And it literally was just like this. I just went into this, I morphed into this tunnel, and I just was like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening to me. Like this, it was always called the thing. This
Mm,
is what is. I'm being sexually abused. And we don't know what we don't know. And I wish we would have this conversation with our kids of like, hey, no one touches you. Not
Mm.
just mommy and daddies can touch you. It's, hey, if anyone touches you, you need to tell someone. You need to scream. You need to say no. And it just needs to be more of a conversation than what it has been, or for me, what my experience of it was. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that and because it's such a hard subject, people shy away from it because they
yeah,
don't, it's,
they feel gross, it's taboo.
yeah. And I totally understand that. Having three daughters, I get that. But I would rather have 5 or 10 minutes or even an hour of really awkward, hard conversation
Yeah.
than for them to experience potentially a lifetime of pain
Mhm.
from that conversation never happening,
Yeah,
from them just not being aware.
100%.
Yeah, it's and it really puts things, uh, I think, into perspective for a lot of people when they, if they can look at it from that angle with their kids, that yeah, it's a hard conversation, it's awkward. Like I always associate it with like like my I can remember like going into puberty and my parents were like kind of having that awkward oh, so you got any questions, or like
Mhm.
nobody wants to have that talk with their
No,
kid. But those hard talks, we have them for a reason, because your kids are going to find out. They're
yeah,
going to figure out the entire world on their own
they are.
through somebody else. So you can either be the one that shares it in a way that makes sense to them and that is positive, constructive, and helpful in their life, or they'll experience it however they experience it.
Well, and also too, I feel like it's so empowering to be able to have that conversation with your children and to introduce it the way you want to introduce it, that coincides with how you parent, but also opening that door for your child to be open with you about those experiences.
Mm.
I feel like a lot of, especially in Utah, it's, we don't talk about sex. It's sex is bad, sick, and wrong, and it's for the one that you
Yep.
marry. Like, well, why is it for the one that you marry if it's bad, sick, and wrong?
Yeah. And they're all fooling themselves
Yeah,
because
yeah.
kids hear the everything in school. They're going to learn it from other
Oh
kids,
yeah,
and they're going
yeah,
to, and it may not be correct, it might be, but if you as a parent don't have that conversation, you don't get to choose.
yeah. It's very naive to think that
Yeah.
they're not finding out about it. And
Yeah.
I feel like now kids are learning about it so much younger too.
Mhm. Yeah, I think with the internet and everybody's got a computer in their pocket, the smartphone, and yeah, I can definitely appreciate my childhood being pre-technology.
Yeah,
Like it was just simpler times, but you know, with what's out there, it's like you got to teach them or they're gonna find out.
yeah,
And as easy as information is obtainable now.
yeah.
So, um, what's kind of the next on your plate as far as treatment stuff? You're still moving forward with jujitsu?
Mhm. With me, I feel like I've actually started to shy away from the traditional art with my therapist, and I've just been doing my own. So it's almost like I'm picking specific scenes, and then I go and work on them.
Mm,
Um, and so recently, I got really triggered a couple weeks ago. I was at a class that I don't normally go to, and the teacher was teaching a specific type of choke, and I wasn't understanding the hand placement on the lapel of the gi. And so I'd asked him, "Hey, can you come show me? I'm not clear on this." And so he did. And as soon as he grabbed me, I got triggered to when I was like 6 or 7. To one of my perpetrators choking me, and that's how it started. Is he would choke me to pass till I passed out, and then he'd molest me, and then
mm,
eventually it just would happen when I was conscious. But it took me back to that and was very triggering. And so for me, I just, like I said, that's the scene that I've been working on. So when I am in jujitsu, like I almost like try to get choked because then I can look at my mat, I can look at the gi, I'm a big senses person, so I can smell like, oh, I can smell their deodorant, or if I can smell their laundry detergent, I'm not in the same place. So working on that specific, and just each thing that I have that comes up, processing it and really leaning into it, and not, like I said, not leaving one stone unturned. So that's currently what I've been working on, and being more open and talking about it, and being more public about my experiences, and creating the space where it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to come forth and share about it.
Yeah, that's great. You've really developed some good tools. Because a lot of those things that you mentioned, like, you talked about the mat a couple times, or like focusing on the gi, but when you start talking about smells
Mhm.
and different things, because all those things can be a trigger response. Any of our senses can be a trigger response. Um, but if we learn to recognize that while the situation fits that trigger, but this is different, maybe like the deodorant or the laundry detergent, that's huge because learning to overcome those triggers, like recognizing a what causes them, and then b how to flip that to where you can process it and sort through it, are huge, because those triggers for a lot of people, and you may have experienced this early on with them, that you're stuck in them. Like I would always be stuck in them. I would hear a sound, or I would see something or a smell that reminded me of the situation.
Paralyzing.
Yes, exactly. And you're just stuck. And it wouldn't be until something happened, like somebody would like snap me out of it, or until I learned those things, that something was different, and recognizing that well, that was a hot day, today's cold out, whatever that was. And that's so huge to be
Mhm.
able to use that tool. That's awesome.
Well, one thing, there's a specific detergent that is probably my biggest trigger. And I don't even know what the detergent is, but I mean, I'll be in a grocery store and somebody will just walk by me and I'll smell it, and I'm frozen.
Mhm.
And that's something that I still work with on a regular basis. And that's always been like that. That's almost been like the one thing throughout my entire life where it was like, yeah, that's still there. You still haven't dealt with that.
Mhm.
But one thing what's been really great that my therapist taught me is, when I do get so triggered of something that is a smell, is to put my hands over my nose, and to breathe in, and to make my brain smell hot chocolate. And so it's almost like pulls me out of it. Like it's not waiting for something else to happen to like break my focus. It's I'm able to do that. And that's been a very empowering but interesting little exercise, because it is hard when you're triggered, you're paralyzed, you're frozen, you can't move.
Mhm.
Remembering that there's just little things that we can do just to bring us back into our body.
Yeah, and it's practice. It
Yeah.
takes practice, but if you don't do the practice, it's like
Yeah.
anything else. But yeah, those little things make a world of difference,
Yeah.
to go from that paralyzed state to just being able to reground yourself and bring yourself back. It's huge. Um, gosh. So gosh, we covered a lot in
I
a
know.
short while
Yeah,
there. And which is great. And I'm so thankful that you came on and shared this, because it isn't something that's talked about very often, and uh it's prevalent, and it shouldn't be, but
no.
it's such a prevalent thing. And I feel like that if there was more awareness to it, um to people at the right age, and even just in general in society, and that could change,
Yeah.
and that it would change.
Yeah.
Um, how can people find you if they wanted to reach out to you?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook. On Facebook, it's just Kia Burns, and then Instagram, my handle is Little Miss Kia. Littlemissia, like the car.
Okay. And I'll put that in the show notes so people can find you if they didn't write it down. Um, yeah, I'm really excited for the direction that you're going because there's a lot of directions you could go with it, and they're all good. I think they'll all bear fruit. It just really depends on which one brings you the most fulfillment and continues to fuel that passion.
Yeah,
So I'm definitely excited for you on that, and looking forward to seeing where this journey goes for you.
yeah, I'm excited too.
Yeah. If there was one thing that you could say to somebody who is struggling, who's either who's dealt with any traumas or is still currently dealing with them and is unsure of where to turn, what to do, maybe has lost hope, what would you say to them?
I would say that you're believed. I feel like that's so much of why people don't come forth is because they're afraid of not being believed. For me, when I came forth, I was never told I was believed. And that's so big. So knowing that they're believed, knowing that what happened to them was not okay. It was bad, but it doesn't make them bad. It doesn't make them less than, and they can truly be their biggest healer. They don't need anything except for at first choosing to love themselves enough and knowing that they're worth it to actually heal and take those steps.
That's perfect. So well said, and so much truth to that. And I would just encourage anybody out there that if you're in that space, reach out to Kia, reach out to me, reach out to anybody, and let's start that healing journey. Let's start that process of becoming whole again and becoming the best version of ourselves that we can be, and just being able to love ourselves and not be filled with shame.
Yeah.
It's wonderful stuff that
Shame,
you're doing.
shame is so big. Sorry to cut you off. Shame
No, you're
is
good.
it's everything. I feel like there's just so much shame and it makes you a prisoner of yourself. And if you can just let the shame go, that's where the healing begins. That's where the magic begins.
Yep, absolutely. There you guys go. So let's work towards that if you're in that space. And Kia, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing where this journey takes you and watching you continue to grow and to do great things. So, guys, make sure you share this episode with somebody who could benefit from it, and uh, just share it in general. So this message and many other messages can continue to get out there to the masses so we can help as many people as possible. And we'll see you guys next week on another episode of Free in Your Mind podcast. Thanks, you guys. Love you all. God bless. Thanks, Kia.
I think